Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the 40-something books that I read in 2024. First, I'm going to go over just a couple little stats. My most read genre is lit fic, and I think followed that is memoirs. Honestly, I've read way more memoirs last year than I normally do. My most given rating was 3.5 out of 5, which is kind of embarrassing because it's showing you I typically just lean towards the middle on my ratings unless a book is extremely good or extremely bad. The first book I read of 2024 was Rabbit Hole by Kate Brody. This is a murder mystery crime book. It follows closely kind of Reddit threads, internet spiraling obsessions. A girl goes missing 10 years ago, and just recently her father killed himself. So it kind of reignites this obsession into finding out what actually happened 10 years ago. I rated this a 4 out of 5. I had New Year's Eve plans and I didn't go to those plans, and I finished this book all in one night. Then I read Manacled, which we all know is getting published into an actual book, Alchemized, this year, 2025. I believe in September. Manacled is a Harry Potter fanfic about Hermione and Draco. It takes place after the last Harry Potter book and movie where Voldemort won the war versus the good people winning the war. I rated this a 4 out of 5. I really loved this book, but then right at the end, it just like lost me. This is my first Hermione fanfic that I ever read. I'm very interested to see how much of the hands-made Harry Potter vibe that they bring into the new book Alchemized. Then I read Fragile Animals. This follows an ex-Catholic girl. She wants to take a little vacation, a break, to kind of process some family trauma that she's dealing with. And so she stays in this tiny little like B&B place in like this small little town, and she meets a man there who may or may not be a vampire. I rated this a 5 out of 5. It was my first 5-star read of 2024. The Hearing Test. Our main character wakes up one morning and she realizes that she's deaf or hard of hearing in one of her ears when she's never been that way before. She goes to the doctor. Doctor has no idea what's going on, and so she decides to document her life with all of this change. When I was reading it, I felt like the book was too smart for me, but it definitely becomes a sort of think piece on loneliness and society and change and family. And I rated that a 4 out of 5. Swanna in Love. This follows a 14-year-old girl, Swanna, whose parents are a little bit absent, and she somehow ends up in a relationship with a very much older man, and we all kind of know how those relationships pan out, especially in books. I really did like this book, honestly. It was very easy to read. I think I read it also all in one setting. I rated it a 4 out of 5. It's a good book for one of those kind of taboo book genres. Next is Piglet. This book is very interesting because when I finished reading it, I liked it, but the longer I sat with it, the more I didn't like it. Piglet is our main character. She is a soon-to-be wife. She's engaged when all of a sudden something devastating happens between her and her fiance, and she rightfully so crashes out. This book is kind of obsessed with food, if you couldn't gather from the front cover or maybe from the name Piglet. The main character talks a lot about ingredients, recipes, making food, eating food. So if that is kind of a bother to you, maybe skip this book. I officially rated this a 3.5 out of 5. A Good Happy Girl. Now this is another one of those weird sapphic books. It follows our main character whose parents just ended up in jail or prison for a crime, and she's like dealing with all of that trauma, obviously, and she ends up in a relationship with a married couple. So they're married and then she's there, you know, and you can imagine how that dynamic is messy, and one person is kind of wanting more and the other person is not much so wanting more. It's kind of a messy relationship, which makes the book in itself messy, but I really did enjoy this read. I rated it a 4 out of 5. Perfume and Pain. I'm actually really sad that I didn't like this book, and so many of the people I follow on Book Talk and Instagram loved this book. This book follows our main character, Astrid, who is trying to save her writing career after she was like canceled, and she wants to write something else, so she keeps trying to come up with something to write. She ends up in some like weird messy relationships and abusing alcohol and drugs, and then all of a sudden this famous person wants to make her book into a movie, and so she's trying to deal with all of that. It didn't mean anything to me. It was one of those messy books that did not have progression or an outcome that I was particularly satisfied with. I rated this a 2.5 out of 5. Any bots. This is like that movie Her, if you've seen it. An AI cuddlebot. There are different kinds of bots, but the AI cuddlebot, Annie, has been programmed by her human to just kind of be like an at-home bot, and then Annie slightly becomes more aware, and then she becomes more human, and then she becomes, well, I actually can't tell you the rest because that would ruin the book, but the ending ruined the book for me. Most of this book is really good. It just had a really weak ending. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. In a Dark Mirror, this is a fictionalized retelling of the Slenderman stabbings that happened in 2014 in Wisconsin. I did not know that. Somehow, when I went into this book, I missed that that was what this book was. So when I realized, when I was like reading it, and I was like, wait, this sounds so familiar. Like, I swear I've seen this in the news. And then I went back and read the synopsis and I was like, oh, duh. It's good, but because we already know what happened in real life, we kind of know what happens in the story. I did enjoy it for the most part. I rated this book a 3 out of 5. Worry. This is a book about two sisters who ended up being roommates, and they're just kind of going through life. And I felt like nothing actually happened in this book. It was more like character development and not plot development, which made for a good story, but a boring story. I don't hate it for the most part, but I did rate it a 3.5 out of 5. Green Dot. Now, forewarning, I hate books that mention COVID. I get that it was something that happened in our life, in real life. I get that things that happen in real life end up happening in the books, especially if it's contemporary fiction. But I just wish that it didn't have to be mentioned. Anyway, Green Dot is about a girl, she gets a job, and she finds her match basically on Teams. I rated this a 2.5 out of 5. I think I would have rated it maybe like a 3 because there was COVID mentioned in the book. It got a lower rating. I also don't really like romance, so I think this book was just not for me. Fruit of the Dead. Now this is a retelling of Persephone and Hades. The whole story is pretty much toxic, controlling. It's exactly like the myth of Persephone and Hades. It is very good. It's probably one of the books that I read in 2024 that I still think about today in 2025. And I do recommend this book for people who like retellings. I rated it a 4 out of 5. Swallow the Ghost. This is an interesting book. It's broken into 3 parts. The first part is the story of Jane. She is a content creator for this author who does murder mysteries. You kind of get to know her life, her work, what she does in her free time, her relationships. And then we go to the second part, which is an investigator who is obviously investigating this murder mystery, and he's trying to find out who did it. So he's going through the last day pretty much of that person's life. And then our third part is fast forward really far into the future, and it is like a podcast kind of discussion about the murder that happens in part 2. I did not guess the plot twist in this book. I did receive it as an ARC, and they told me that they might change it. They emailed me and they said, here, fill out this survey. We might change the way this book ends. And I haven't read it since, so my rating could change based on what the book actually is. Maybe I need to reread this. I rated it a 4 out of 5, but this is like a question mark because if the book is way different than the arc that I received, I don't know if I can confidently say it's a 4 out of 5. The Skunks. This is an interesting book because it's about a girl who sees some skunks in her yard, and basically it's like diary point of view, kind of. Literally the book feels like it's about nothing when you're reading it, but you know, if you kind of read between the lines, it's really about intimacy, relationships, and girlhood. I rated it a 3.5 out of 5. I did enjoy reading it and it was super quick. It just didn't feel like it was strong enough to be a good book for me. Woman. I left this unrated because I have no idea what I would rate this still to this day. It's kind of a confessional novel about queer love, but it's also kind of like a weird, really short, obsessed relationship. It was an interesting read. It truly felt almost like a Tumblr post. Take of that what you will. Cigarette Lemonade. This is about two main characters. One is a drug dealer and one is the drug dealer's like accomplice, and they are going on a road trip together, and they kind of leave this path of destruction and death behind them as they're traveling. It's a super short book and the ending was actually pretty decent, so I rated this a 3 out of 5. Henry. Now this is a retelling of Shakespeare's Henriade. I haven't read that book since high school, I believe, so I rated the book and reviewed the book pretending like I didn't know that this was a retelling. It is a book that's full of like drugs and obsession, love. It follows Henry and this kind of rich life that he is to inherit, to be in, to be present in, and also his kind of rebellion towards that life. Rated it a 4 out of 5. Misrecognition. This book I rated a 3 out of 5 because it's about our main character Elsa, and she just got out of a relationship, I think it was a couple who just like broke up with her, and she kind of spirals out of control and she emotionally attaches herself to this actor that she sees on social media who very, very similarly sounds to me like Timothée Chalamet. When I read this book, I was like, okay, Timothy? But it's not confirmed that it's Timothy. Ornithologist Field Guide to Love. I might have butchered that. This was one of the first like romance books that I remember really reading and eating up. It's very playful. The whole time was very light. I rated it a 4 out of 5, which is pretty high for a romance for me. It's about two enemy bird watchers who fall in love. Basically like enemies to lovers, but not so, more like competitors to lovers. And also, oh, there's only one bed kind of stuff. That's your thing. We Were the Universe. I rated this a 3.5 out of 5. This follows a young mom. I think her kid's like 3 maybe, and she just lost her sister. So it is 2 point of views. It's the past with memories of her being pregnant and her sister being there, and then it's the current time, which is when her sister has passed away and she's kind of dealing with that grief and loss, but also maintaining herself being a mom. Bratz. This is one of those weird books where you don't really know what's going on the entire time, and then you finish the book and you still don't know what's going on, but you think you had a good time reading the book, so you said that it was a 3 out of 5. It follows our main character. His parents pass away, and so he's going to the house to clean it, to get it ready to be sold, but then the house is like really moldy and falling apart, and then he keeps finding this like manuscript, but it's changing every time he reads it. It's a very interesting book that really plays on itself the entire time. Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I rated this a 3.5 out of 5 graciously. I think it's the only Emily Henry book that I've truly even enjoyed a little bit. And this is Our Bestie Gets Left at the Altar for her husband's girl best friend. And we all know how we feel about girl best friends. And so she gets kicked out of the house and she ends up moving in with her ex-husband's best friend's ex-boyfriend, and then things kind of unfold between them. It was good. It wasn't mind-blowing. It didn't bring forward a lot of emotions for me, besides when I got to the end of the book and I was like, finally? 3.5 out of 5, because out of all of Emily Henry's romance love interests, I think Miles would probably be my kind of guy. Committed. This is a memoir, and it's a very interesting look into mental health institutes, big pharma, and how women get treated by doctors. It's a pretty short read, honestly. It's filled with like more academic writing and then the author's personal experiences. I really, really did love this book, and I annotated it on my first read. I left Committed unrated. I do not rate memoirs because they are somebody's life experiences, and I can't really judge so much on their experiences. I can judge on their writing, that is true, but I just choose to leave memoir's unrated for that reason. Penance by Eliza Clark. It makes me rethink every girlfriend group I've ever had. That's all I can really say about it. It was a good book. I think people didn't like it because they weren't realizing that the narrator, the point of view we are getting, is a journalist who's not a great journalist, who's trying to make their career better by writing this. And I rated Penance 4 out of 5. Tweak by Nick Sheff. This is another memoir. This is the Couple to Beautiful Boy by his father, David Sheff. It's a great memoir about addiction, relapse, mental health, getting help, rehab. I loved Beautiful Boy. I loved the Beautiful Boy movie, and I loved Tweak. It's such a good, strong, true memoir for what it is about. The Goldfinch. Now, everybody knows I'm a Donna Tartt lover, and I've read Secret History many times, and I've read The Little Friend once, and this is my second Goldfinch read. I rated it a 4 out of 5, and to sum it up, pretty much a boy steals a painting during a traumatic experience, somehow beautifully destroys his entire life, but in a way that is good for the reader more than the main character. The Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards. This is another memoir about a woman whose husband dropped dead, and as she's going through their life together, basically packing up his stuff in their house and trying to heal those wounds in her, she begins revealing these secrets that he kept from her, and it really just made me think, like, do you ever know anyone truly? Memoir, once again, is unrated. The writing was really good. I read through this book quickly. It was a great, humorous, but also very serious take on grief and loss. Men Have Called Her Crazy is another memoir which actually made me feel crazy when I read it, because I felt like just because you went to a mental hospital doesn't mean that you have to write about it necessarily. It was good. It needed more editing. It's about a woman who goes to a mental hospital because she's kind of having a sort of breakdown during this time of her life where she's going through a divorce and lots of other things are changing during, I believe it's during COVID or right when COVID starts, kind of. It's interesting to see the inside of how those hospitals were running during COVID times, I will say. But I felt like it was really out of touch with the mental health side, and that's all I'm gonna say on it. Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. This is a story about a girl who's living with her family. They are very religious. She is LGBTQ, and she's kind of like grappling with that part of herself that is frowned upon in the religious household. They don't necessarily want her to be gay. I rated this a 2.5 out of 5 because I think it was overwrought with religious overtones. I also felt really lost when I was reading the book. There was a lot of fantasy components that I felt like didn't necessarily need to be in. I also thought there were a lot of characters that had no purpose. Gray Dog. This is about a woman who accepts a teaching position in this little town, and both the woman and the town have way more secrets than you would think, and it's unbecoming of both the town and the teacher. Soft LGBTQ. The ending actually ruined the entire book for me. I'm sorry if you love this book, but I cannot stand the ending. I rated this book a 2 out of 5. And that is my lowest rated book of 2024. Blue Sisters by Coco Malors. I haven't read Frankenstein and Cleopatra. I'm not sure I will after reading this book if the writing is anything of the same. This follows the Blue Sisters as they deal with the loss of one of their sisters, and it's really just secrets coming out, therapy session, kind of release of trauma, and that's the whole book. I wasn't bored, but I was not captivated in the way that I think I could have been if the book was written a little bit differently, and I gave it a 3 out of 5. Evenings and Weekends. This is a book about 4 people who are just tired of their life and want some change, want something new, and also there is a whale that is beached on the shore. It can't get back in the water, and I think that is supposed to be a metaphor for how the characters feel in this book. What it says on the back of the book is that it is for those who enjoyed Sally Rooney, and I do not think that that is fair to Sally Rooney, honestly. The writing was not similar, in my opinion. I rated this a 3 out of 5. Sociopath. This is another memoir that the author claims to be a self-diagnosed sociopath and then tells you that she's not like all the sociopaths that you've seen in the movies and TV shows. You read her book and you think maybe she is like all those other sociopaths. Actually, it's an unrated book and this is her experience in life, so I will leave it at that. But I did not enjoy what I read. The Look Back Window. This is a devastating book about trauma and drug addiction, drug abuse, and what it means to come to terms with things that have happened to you and how to handle them. I rated this a 4.5 out of 5. This is one of those books, if you have trigger warnings or content warnings that you need to look up, I would do so for this book. It is about someone who was abused when they were younger, and they have a very specific amount of time to take that person to court, and they're trying to decide if that is what they want to do or not. Rabbit's Heart. This is another memoir, so it's unrated. It follows a young girl after she just learned that her mother was kidnapped and then murdered for no apparent reason, and she grows up without a mother figure, but also with the police being unsure of who did this to her mother. And then it kind of shows you the evolution of DNA and police, what they do in the background. Martyr. This is about a person who's newly sober. He is son to Iranian immigrants, and he travels across the US to meet with this artist whose last exhibit is themselves sitting inside of a museum as they're dying, I believe from cancer. I rated this a 2.5 out of 5. A lot of people love this book, and I do truly see why people like this book, but the ending was not strong enough, felt very rushed, and it felt like, oh, I need to finish this book right now and this is what I'm gonna end it with. If the ending had been stronger, I could see myself rating this higher. Sour Cherry. This was an ARC I received. It's a retelling of Bluebeard. This was so good because the way it's written is a great building up and then an extremely fast kind of climax and ending that gives you sort of almost whiplash, but it matches the story so well. I really did love it. I didn't know it was a Bluebeard retelling. I've actually never read a Bluebeard book before this, so I rated it a 4 out of 5. Down the Drain by Julia Fox. This is another memoir, so it's going to remain unrated. This literally felt like I was watching a Get Ready With Me TikTok by Julia Fox where she was like applying her makeup or maybe shaving her head bald or whatever, and she was telling me the craziest stories. The way it was written, very elementary, but so captivating, so wonderful. This is probably one of my favorite memoirs, celebrity memoirs that I have read. When We Lost Our Heads. Simply put, rich girl and poor girl are obsessed with each other, and this causes some crazy butterfly effects. It's got lesbian yearning, Victorian petticoats, cake, and class warfare. So I don't really know what else you need in a book that's not in this book. I rated it a 3.5 out of 5, simply because there were a couple chapters that I felt were dragging on too much or a little bit wordy or unnecessary to the entire plot of the book. Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. I rated this a 4.5 out of 5. Thinking back, it might be a 5 out of 5. Basically, like, imagine you got married and then that person died and you realize you knew nothing about them. So back to that memoir, A Widow's Guide to Dead Bastards, but the lesbian version. This girl, her wife dies, who's a famous artist, and as she's writing this biography about her life, she's unveiling all these secrets. It's also in this kind of alternate universe America. It's very like dystopian vibes. I really did love it a lot. And then the last book I read in 2024 was The God of the Woods, which I swear to God I thought was going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. I was so disappointed. So I think I finally decided that if everybody else on Book Talk and Bookstagram loves a book, I'm probably not gonna love it as much, and if everybody hates a book, I'm gonna like it. I don't really know what that says about me. The God of the Woods is, a girl is at summer camp and she goes missing, and then it kind of splits, and you go back into the past where a different kid was at camp and goes missing in the same town. The issue for me was you've got different years, but then you've got like 8 different point of views, 8 different people telling the story. So you're going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, basically every chapter. I rated it a 3 out of 5. I think that is a gracious rating. I really did want to be on the hype train that everyone else was about this book. So that is all of the books that I read in 2024. If you've read these and you felt the same or you felt different, let me know. So I love talking about why I liked a book and why I didn't like a book. Until next time. Bye.